I'd like to introduce you to some fellow educators who are actually engaged in this process of embedding theology of work into their academic programs. I'm going to take you to two schools. The first one is Isaac Newton Christian Academy in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, under the direction of Dean Ritter. And the second school is the Kingdom Citizens International School in Jos, Nigeria, where Segun Globagan is the Director of Education. So let's watch these interviews.
Well, I used the Awesome Activator for a project that the students do to research their own family ancestry. We do it as part of a history unit on the last half of the 1800s, specifically focusing on the immigration influx that happened during that time. They had to individually pick some biblical truths, connect those in the little word web with the project. So when you think about a family relating together, this student wrote, "I can help other people in my family when they have sad or mad emotions or celebrate when they're happy." And another one is, "God has a purpose for my family to teach me right or wrong." And then one more that I really liked was the truth, "Everything good comes from God." So that includes you and your family.
Great. How do you think that the Awesome Activator as a tool in general serves to help students to get a biblical view of work?
I really appreciate the Awesome Activator because without it, a lot of assignments can seem purely academic. Some kids don't connect with a certain topic or a subject, and the Awesome Activator always gives each individual child a way to connect. They see the bigger picture, they see God's purpose, and it gives kids more motivation. They seem more excited about it, they seem more interested, and even if they're not super interested in it, definitely more willing and understanding the purpose of it.
What I hear you describing here is a way to help to bring greater meaning to the work that they are actually doing.
Absolutely. And a part of the rest of the Awesome Activator is talking about what skills you are going to need to learn and actions you're going to take. Developing their writing ability and developing their ability to speak in front of people is something that God wants them to learn.
Mrs. Greer, let's talk a little bit about your experience then. Tell us how you use the Awesome Activator.
We were studying Africa. They already had completed a chapter on Egypt and ancient times in Africa. This current chapter was on modern day Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a project where the kids take an African country and they design their own web page. To give this project meaning, I started it with the Awesome Activator. We did it as a group, and I prepared an Awesome Activator on my own the weekend before presenting it, coming up with the ideas that I was hoping that they would come up with, just as a base to start. And they blew me away. I was so excited when I sat down with them. We filled the whiteboard. They found all of their own ideas, which included mine, and then some. We discussed this probably for 40 minutes. They were into it, and they were enjoying it, and they were excited, and it just became contagious across the room. It was fun.
How does this exercise? How do these exercises help shape their view of work?
I think both of our activities require a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of digging for facts, and in your case, digging for family history. Right. It's not something that's done in a day or an hour. It's something that our project has lasted about 2.5 weeks. We're still wrapping it up this week, actually.
Yeah, ours will take a month.
But it's about an attitude toward this work. It was, you give them a project where there's lots of research or there's lots of writing. Writing. That's work.
Yeah, that's what, you mean you're actually making your kids work? What
I
a
know. But if you start with this, their attitude toward the work changes. It's not, another project.
Why do you think that is? What's going on in their heads? Why are they
I
coming
think
alive here?
I think they see the connection. I think they see that what they're doing is pleasing and honoring to God. And when they understand that, hey, this is not just an activity, this is something I can do that's going to please God, their attitude changes. The meaning behind it changes. And
Yeah.
it's not about, oh, this is hard work. It's about, wow, this is great work I can do for God.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, it brings it out of the classroom into a much bigger picture here, as we always say. I think that's very, very significant.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that I've loved about this theology of work study from the beginning. It's changed my personal life and how I approach coming into the classroom every day and how I approach going home to my kitchen. And so I share that with the students too.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about it in brief ways throughout the day when I help to remind them that they're not just sitting in a desk, going through motions, doing what someone tells them to do. They are part of a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Their lives are part of a big purpose that God has for them. And everything they do, God has a purpose for, and they can either do it for God's purpose and for God's glory, or they're doing it, or they're doing what they want to do, and they're doing something for themselves, and then they're not fitting into God's kingdom, God's purpose. And as soon as you put it in that context, they're with you.
And I take it that when you say that this has had a personal effect on your thinking, that you're actually thinking that way too when you're doing the laundry. Is that what you're saying?
It's really changed my life in general. My purpose in everything that I do and my relationship with the Lord has changed as I think about the theology of how I do everything I do.
I think it has a lot to do with intentionality, doesn't it? You know, you're actually bringing these things to the conscious level, making those awesome activator connections, so to speak, between that activity and the purposes of God behind doing laundry or whatever it is.
We have a rigorous academic program here, but all that rigor has to point towards something, and our students need to see that it has meaning and relevance, that we're not just pushing them to work hard for no reason.
Yes.
And they're beginning to understand that we're helping them to be prepared for God's kingdom, to be used by God in whatever purpose that he calls them for.
Yes.
So they're reacting to that, and they're seeing the meaning of that. And we hear from the parents how glad they are. They recognize what was going on in our classrooms without us really talking about it much. Parents began to notice that things were different, and they began to notice that their children were coming home with new skills. And so they came to us and said, what is going on that has caused these kinds of conversations that we're hearing in our home? So we had to do a better job of communicating to them what we were doing here so they could understand it better.
Thank you for taking time to chat. From your perspective, why is getting theology of work into the elementary and secondary school, why is that important? And particularly, why is it important for Nigeria?
Thank you very much. That's so critical because we want them to be able to see that from the onset, especially from the elementary school, that the Bible is not just a church book, but it's a life book. But we often see the Bible as something that is so limited to Sundays. But we want them to be able to take it to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And, from the classroom to the kitchen to everywhere that they find themselves.
Shagun, tell us a little bit about how your incorporation of theology of work into the academic curriculum shapes the thinking of your students. How does that happen?
It's mind-boggling for them. When you ask them questions on subject matter, let's say we're talking about mining and you're asking them, how does God view mining? How does a miner fit into God's plan and perspective? Or you're taking biology or you're taking economics and you're teaching them that, and you're making them to see God's perspective about economic matters, how God wants us to undo money, as it is stated in the Bible. It's for some of them, it's been a wow moment with them.
Did I just hear you say that you're actually helping your students to see that earning money can be a godly thing? Did I hear that correctly? I thought making a profit was a sin.
That's what the church taught us.
You're actually helping your students to see how economics fits into God's purpose for their life.
All of our teachers, they're beginning to see that there's no aspect, there's no subject matter in the curriculum that they cannot find a biblical perspective to. One of the children said, so it looks like I've actually not been thinking accurately about what I want to be in the future. God has a particular plan for me, and I think I need time. I need time to be able to think accurately and put God's perspective on the future that I'm desiring.
And it sounds like you're also getting across the idea that if they do go to work for the mining company in your area, that too is the work of God. Is that correct?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That's a mind-boggling thought. A lot of people think if you want to do the Lord's work, you want to do what Pastor Dot is doing, and but we don't be working in the mines as the work of God. But it's amazing when that gets in a student's head, and they see, yes, I can serve God through that vocation is powerful.
Yeah, especially when it, learned at an early stage.
Yes.
Yes, especially when an elementary school pupil understands that from age 5, 6, 7, then it's that kind of person will not go into any kind of confusion. There is no work on earth that God cannot use. So that changes the whole equation.
Well, I wonder if some people might say, hey, 7 years old, that's awfully young to be talking about work. What would you say to someone who would say, hey, that's too early to be talking about such things?
Well, what I tell people is everybody works. Every human being works. Work is ingrained in human beings. We are created to work. So it can't be too early and it cannot be too late.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're bringing this up because actually when they go to school, they're going to work, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Very well.
Because they're expending
work.
Yeah,
no, it's true. They're not getting paid for it, but they're still working. They're working hard.
Absolutely. God himself works.
Yeah.
God himself is a worker. So, if we can see God in work and then work becomes something that we desire, something that we enjoy, work is the best way that God has honored human beings. To be able to work, to be able to expend energy, to be able to see how you can cooperate with God in his creative kind of quest. It brings so much joy.
What you're just describing gives meaning to school.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You're going there to actually become equipped to work well.
And the work starts from there because what the elementary school boys and girls takes home is called homework.
Yeah. This is important stuff because you're shaping the paradigms of the body of Christ. And I also appreciate the fact you're taking the long vision here. This is not a quick fix. And part of that long vision is affecting the thinking of children.
Absolutely. This is the future. This is the future, yeah.
Now, I hope that was helpful. Dean School and Shagun School, they're two schools that are working on the Work-Life Restoration and Advancement Project. And the goal of that project is to actually get theology of work embedded into the normal, regular academic curriculum K through 12. If you want more information, you can go to the Coram Deo website. Now, I'd like to conclude this series with some recommendations for teachers in state schools. And you don't have the liberty, at least in this country, to be as direct as teachers in Christian schools. Now, first of all, bear in mind that your greatest asset in the classroom are Christian students. Hopefully you'll have at least one. But what I'm talking about here will require a little bit of effort on your part outside of your normal duties as a teacher. But I just want you to consider this. What if you were to invest some time with those Christian students? What if you were to invest some time with them and their parents, maybe together? What if you were to teach these sons and daughters on a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon how to use the tools that you were introduced to in this series? And what if you were to train these students to use the activity contextualizer and the awesome activator in conjunction with whatever subject it is you teach? What if you were to train them on the side how to use these tools when they write their essays, when they do their oral reports or research projects or whatever it is? And what if you were to train them to share their thoughts in classroom discussions? What if you were to teach a current issues class and you train the students how to contextualize issues using the contextualizer within a biblical frame of reference? Could you actually train them on how to articulate that view in classroom conversations and give them as much time in class as you would any other student to share their thoughts? And what if you were training them to do the same when they write their papers, when they do their book reports or their research projects? Now, this would address two great needs. Number one, the need for non-Christian students in state schools to be exposed to Christian thought and ideas. And what better way for those non-Christian students to hear those ideas than through their peers, their fellow students? If you can equip those students, those Christian students, to be comfortable and secure in this way of thinking and this way of articulating, they'll need courage. Great. The second thing it will address is the need for Christian students to actually articulate in an intelligible way what Christian thought actually is, and to be able to engage in a classroom discussion from a biblical perspective, and to be able to put whatever it is you're dealing with in the context of a much bigger picture that goes far beyond that subject matter itself, and to be comfortable doing that in a winsome way, in a way that's rational, makes sense to their peers. Could you train them to do that? And if they can't do it in your class, where can they do it? And by the way, what I've just described is legal. You're not doing it, you're not instructing your Christian students on school time. Now, there's another thing to think about. There are a lot of opportunities in normal, regular curriculum to expose your students to Christian thought by sharing with your students the Christian thought of real people in history. For example, Carver. You're doing a unit on plants. Bring Carver into the picture. He actually had an effect on American history. You can tell them about Carver, and you can tell them not only what he did by creating 418 products out of plants, but why he did it. What was motivating Carver? What was the idea here that actually drove him to do what he did? It's factual, it's historic, and that's legal. And you can do the same thing for many historic figures. Consider, for example, Johann Sebastian Bach. Darrow mentioned him earlier. And what motivated him when he was composing. You can share the whole story with your kids because it's history and it's factual. If you're talking about Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, and you do not talk about the biblical concepts or ideas that drove King, you're not telling the full story. Your kids are only getting a part of the picture. They're not getting the most important part. You can share those things with confidence because it's history. And I actually think if you don't share those things, it's substandard education. Now, here's the third idea. There are many opportunities, many natural, normal opportunities to inform your students of what a biblical worldview is by taking advantage of what I call fingerprints all over history and literature, even science and current issues. And what do I mean by fingerprints? Well, if there's something in the news about Good Samaritan laws, which is a common English expression, you can take the time to actually explain to your kids where that term, Good Samaritan, came from. And you can actually share with them the words of Jesus, the story Jesus told, to help them understand that concept. The English language is full of biblical fingerprints, and if you're attentive to those, you can take advantage of them as teachable moments. I recently heard of a book written by a linguist named David Crystal. The book is called Begat, the King James Bible in the English Language. Now, Crystal has counted 257 phrases from the Bible that are used in contemporary English language. For example, gave up the ghost from Genesis 35:29, salt of the earth from Matthew 5:13, filthy lucre from 1 Timothy 3:3, no peace for the wicked from Isaiah 57:21, a fly in the ointment from Ecclesiastes 10:1, and the blind leading the blind from Matthew 15:13 are just a few. You're not proselytizing when you educate your students, Christian or non-Christian. They should know this stuff. And you know, I can hardly read a classic without running into plenty of biblical fingerprints. Take advantage of those opportunities in literature. They're all over the place. To tell your kids the rest of the story. And see what God will do. Now, I'm just scratching the surface here. If you're a teacher in a state school, I recommend the work of Gateways to Better Education. It's an organization that helps teachers in state schools to do the kinds of things that I just told you about. Well, I hope I've sparked some ideas in you that you can carry further, no matter where you teach, and whether you're a parent or a pastor or a teacher. And I'm thankful that I had this opportunity to share with you, and I really do pray that God's blessing will be on you as you continue to live out the implications of your faith in the context of your work as an educator. God bless you.